not seen the privacy policy, Jack.
Yeah.
It's okay. There isn't a privacy policy. This is not a commercial enterprise. There is no organisation running it. It is basically impossible to sue because there is no organisation behind it.
Domestic is it? We go for that.
Anarchic rather than domestic, but close enough.
Excuse me.
Welcome to Security Coffeehouse, which seems to be a sort of podcast chat, general discussion thing where a bunch of people with ideas get together and talk about a topic, often with a drink in hand or some sort of relaxed environment. And there is an audience, which may be small or large, who throw questions at the panelists now and then. That basically sums up the whole thing. I am not in my normal studio, so I may be a bit thrown by questions and similar because I don't have my normal high-tech multiple screen setup where I can say, okay, well, that's the YouTube feed, that's where LinkedIn is, that's the Zoom chat. Instead, I am on holiday, embodying the whole idea of work-life blend. So that's my excuse. Next step, let's do introductions. And I usually do this in a sort of random order, which is clockwise from me on the screen. So we'll start off with Scott. You're up first. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm not really sure myself. No, my name's Scott. I'm basically self-employed. I do all manner of things. I get involved in a lot of things from OSINT investigations to TV and media work. So I do a lot of film and TV stuff where they need an expert on screen and that person wasn't available, so they call me. But I do a lot of stuff like that, and it's so I've worked for myself since I quit the corporate life in 2012. So I'm hoping that I have a little bit of not knowledge to share, but just some insight into going from working in a massive multi-story corporate building to working in your pajamas. And James is muted.
Yeah, that happens. Rob, I've got an idea about what you did next, having worked with you, but for all of the ladies and gentlemen at home and watching us live on LinkedIn, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a commercial lawyer, specializing in data privacy. Been doing that sort of for about 10 years now. I'm actually a consultant, so I don't work for any sort of law firm. And I've sort of consulted in all sorts of different industries: defense, pharmaceutical, online gambling, and more recently, where I met James was Merlin Entertainment, which was pretty fantastic. And I'm currently just sort of working for an online gambling company that hasn't actually started yet. They're sort of due to go live in October, so doing lots of sort of infrastructure and sort of all that sort of good stuff.
And finally, unless our other panelist does turn up at some point, in which case they will be more than welcome. But finally, Pelin.
Hi, nice to be here.
So, who are you? What do you do?
So I organize events, mostly in the security space, and I head up CTG Intelligence, and I'm also part of the British Bodyguard Association and Circuit Magazine. I'm doing a very nice initiative with you, James, which you might want to talk about. And previously, I've been a civil servant, and previously I've done events around the world. But of course, now we're in lockdown, so it's been 19 and this week 20 virtual conferences I've run. So that's me. I'm not in the corporate world anymore. I work for myself. I run a business. So I've got both sides of the house type of opinions, like Scott and I assume like Robert.
And this is obviously Security Coffeehouse, the whole idea being the old, well, it would have been the Parisian salons, but I'm British, so it's the London coffee houses, which didn't just serve coffee, but where people could just pop in, talk about things, come up with ideas, and see how everything went. Very simple stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing. And we do have a topic for tonight, which is one that's very close to my heart and a bit more independent from security from our normal topics, which is about work-life balance, work-life blend, working patterns, and similar. So I'm going to just kick it off with a question, and I'd like everyone to do what they understand as the definition of work-life balance. And Rob, if we start with you on what does it mean to you to have a balanced work life?
It's a good question. I think for me, it's being able to do everything that you need or want to do during the day, and obviously get your job done as well. So, for example, if you want to mow the lawn, if you want to mow the lawn, go and mow the lawn. But as long as you get your job done, you get your job done. If you need to go on a call, if you need to, sort of join a meeting, then obviously you're supposed to be there and you should be there. But I pretty much feel as if you should put in to the company that you work for what you want to get out into the company. And I've worked in all kinds of jobs, all kinds of industries, and sometimes because where I first started off as a commercial lawyer, a lot of my work was driven by the business, i.e., I wouldn't have to review contracts or get involved in mergers and acquisitions if there weren't any contracts to review or any mergers and acquisitions to do. So I could do a 4-hour day quite comfortably, whereas other days I'd be working for 12, 13, 14 hours, and that was part of it for me. So for me, it's a loyalty thing. If the company trusts you to work from home, and to be able to sort of get on with the work you're supposed to do and to attend the meetings and attend whatever you need to do, and you can do your chores, or you can pick up the kids from school, I honestly don't see the issue at all. And I've been a manager myself, and I've always followed that attitude, and I found that sort of people work best that way, and give 110%. But obviously, that's my experience, and that there's a different range of how old people are, and the whole trust piece as well, where for example, oil and gas I worked in, there's a very low threshold of trust there. No sort of working from home at all. If you're not in the office, you're not working kind of ethos, which was not really very helpful. But yeah, my sort of ethos is trust the employee to work for you. And at the end of the day, if the employee isn't doing the work, you should realize that they're not doing the work. If you don't realize that, then you shouldn't be employing them, because obviously you don't need them. So that's kind of where I am with that.
Thank you. Pelham, let's jump to you next. I know that recently because you've been running these events, you've basically been on about 12 different time zones over the last few weeks. So I'm interested to hear what your view of what is a balanced work life, what is work life balance?
Well, every time I hear work-life balance, mysteriously, and it's just because I walk past the sign a lot, on the Friend's House or the Quaker House or something on the Euston Road, it says, "Whatever you do, do it with thy might." Now, I thought at the time, when I was an employee, I thought, oh yeah, right, that's easy for you to say, big sign on the wall. But I've come to think about it. Work-life balance, yeah, it's about trust, and it's about getting the job done. I guess it's about being happy, and is being happy, working 20-hour days and getting Margaret Thatcher-esque sleep of just a few hours. I don't know if that's your thing. Then good. There's of course a difference between an employer and an employee. Employers often bemoan, "Oh, why can't I get them to work like me?" Actually, you don't want that as an employer, because then they'll steal your company off you. There's a reason why you have employees and employers. But yeah, I guess, I'm sorry to be cliche, but I think as long as you're happy, you've got that balance. Others will try and tear you down and try and get you to do other things. And of course, yeah, sure, just because you got work-life balance, being happy doesn't mean you're giving enough attention to your family and friends, and that's a whole nother issue. But I'm going to go with the cliche: are you happy?
Okay, thank you. And Scott, before I go off on my own little rant about it.
I just kind of want to pick up two things, and I'll tell you what my perception is. Rob said it's all about trust. I used to work for corporate pharmaceutical company. I'll never forget asking for, "Hey, look, I'm going to a funeral in the morning, and it would be really inefficient for me to come back to the office because the area the funeral was in and where the office was, it would just be totally ridiculous. I'm going to work from home. We all have laptops. Hope that's okay." I told my manager, who was the same age as me, and he turned around without even realizing what he'd said and said, "As long as you're working from home and not just playing PlayStation." I was like, A, I'm going to a funeral of a friend, so that was a douche move. Secondarily to that, there should be a lot more trust here in the fact that I'm working from home. I'm having a half day off and working from home, which I didn't really need to do. I just realized there was a lot of projects I had to go out. So yeah, trust is a massive, massive thing. My clients trust me to work in my house, but they don't check up on me every 2 minutes. And it's kind of like basically what Felon said about, work-life balance, happiness. My personal take on it is I don't know. I don't care. I don't care to define a work life balance. I know it's wrong when I feel like crap, when I get up in the morning and feel as if I'm living in an office, or even worse than that, I'm working in my home, which obviously I'm doing, but the entire house should not feel like an office. I need that disconnect. I know it sounds really bizarre, but the only time I realize, oh, work life balance is a bit of a problem is when I start thinking about the work life balance. It just should all slot in naturally and it just should feel natural. I shouldn't need to overthink it. If that makes sense. I know it's quite a bizarre concept.
I'm going to say it does make sense to me, and I'll do my own little view on this now. This whole session, or the topic of this one, was kicked off because I was taking a conference call in the middle of a field down in Devon while I was camping. And I was absolutely happy with that. And everyone else was happy with that, because the alternatives would have been either I don't take that call and I don't do the work, or I don't go camping because, it's a Monday. And so that means it's a work day. So I can't be out there enjoying time with family and going looking for scallops on the beach the next day. So that's where it all came from. So I think all of your opinions on it make sense. I do think it is very hard to define, and part of the problem is this idea that you somehow have to miraculously and perfectly balance the two, which is why this whole thing is titled work-life balance, or balance versus blend. I don't think there's necessarily a separation. But we have had a question come in already, which is unusual. So piecework, the idea that you're paid for what you produce, you're paid for the outcomes, went out of fashion in a big way. Now, most of the time, in fact, pretty much all employment, you are paid for being present. You are paid for being there 9 to 5, or being there on your shift. And there's a mention that all of us have basically said what we produce being the important bit, rather than time we spend on it being what matters. Is there an issue here with employers looking for people being present when what they actually need is, what are you doing for me, and are you achieving those goals? Let's go with Pelham first, because I think you're the most distant from classical employment here.
I guess.
And then if we go to Scott and Rob.
Isn't it something from Karl Marx that talks about exploitation and profit coming out of workers' labor? There's a nice quote, I can't remember it, but something like that. It is the fundamental difference between an employer and an employee. I could, in my business, get paid £1 million for doing something that takes me 5 seconds. But if I was an employer, I'd get wise to it. I'd say, I can probably pay £1.99 for that same thing if I squeeze you hard enough. It's the difference between operating as a business, where you're exchanging value for money, and being an employee, we're exchanging time for money. Plus, don't forget, just as I think on a number of occasions we've, said, the pandemic has revealed just how much of a vanity project a lot of offices are. right? Business owners were told all the time by senior management, I must have a sexy office in a central London location because everybody will feel that, the pressure to work hard enough. And we've discovered that it wasn't, in fact, the employees, and it wasn't, in fact, the customers. It was the middle management and senior management who desperately wanted to feel appreciated by having such a beautiful office and fiefdom. And a similar thing is true. They want the feeling of people at their beck and call because of deep-seated insecurities, or perhaps the way society has structured their self-worth for them. So going back to the question of time versus output, it's not that companies need the time. The Japanese productivity is very low, but they have sometimes 50 million hour work weeks. It's that feeling of control and being part of it. And I've succumbed to it too. But then again, I also worked on Brazilian and Singaporean hours at the same time. That was particularly relevant. So there you go. Bit of a rant from me, but that's what I think about it. You right, James?
Hey, that's not Corona, chap.
I'm good. No, it's Jupiler.
No wonder why.
Scott, while I learn to breathe again.
Sure. No, I actually fully agree. I think offices are a massive vanity project. And this idea, I mean, I've got a couple of friends whose companies have been incredibly fair. In fact, went out their way during the pandemic to make sure that, and it's no surprise these companies are quite young companies run by younger people that understand that you can get the same output with less time being put in. And what I mean by that is they actually sat down with all their staff virtually, obviously, and said, we don't actually care if the productivity dips. We expect that due to various factors just now because you're all stuck in the house and you're going basically loony at the moment. We get it. We also get the fact that a work-life balance is important. So it's going to take you a while to adjust it. A lot of people did not work from home as a de facto standard. A lot of people just did it occasionally when they had a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment or something, and it was just easier for them. So it was a one-off rather than 3-6 months. But they said to them, we don't care if productivity dips. If you need to take 10 minutes in the middle of a virtual meeting and just go and do your own thing, or deal with a dog, or deal with the kids or something, or go and just chill out for 10 minutes, that is cool. As long as productivity doesn't dip below, I think 70% was the figure, we are okay with that. And there was kind of murmurs of, oh, you shouldn't tell your staff it's okay to have a 70% production productivity rate. Do you know what happened? The productivity's never hit 70%. It's always been a way above and beyond that, and people have worked hours of overtime, they've worked the weekends, they've worked where they normally would finish at 5 or 5:30. They've stayed to 6, 6:30 because, well, I would be traveling, commuting at this time anyway, and probably checking my email, so I might as well do an extra hour here and there. Oh, I'm out my bed an hour early. I don't need to commute in. I don't have a meeting until 11 a.m., so I can do it in my pajamas for another extra hour before. Their productivity, they've got extra time, but they didn't ask for it, and the productivity has actually gone up from their low bar. This is rock bottom. This is the least amount of productivity we can expect. That if you see where I'm coming from, if you ask for the extra time, you would not get the extra time. People would be pissed. They would, do that thing at 5:29. They're watching the clock. They're watching the right 5:30. Good. Whereas now it's like, oh crap, it's 6:30. It's this idea of, I guess, trust. Vanity projects like The Office, or we work 9 to 5. And you better be working 9 to 5, rather than saying, we don't care if productivity goes down. If you want to go play Mario Kart, cool. All of a sudden you get more hours. I think treating people like adults goes a long way.
And I will point out, letting them go play Mario Kart is definitely still treating them like adults. It's giving them the choice to do that. We won't talk about blue shells. Rob?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Scott said there. A few examples is I joined a magic circle law firm, and I've just come from a very, very stressful job. So instead of sort of being client facing, I took a role that was internal facing. So it wasn't sort of, having to meet client demands. It was looking after the company internally. And therefore, it technically should have been more 9 to 5. And I can remember being there for about 3 or 4 months. And I can remember my boss turning around and going, "No, well, you know what? We should work and carry out the same hours as the solicitors do." Now, bearing in mind, a lot of these solicitors are hugely highly paid. I mean, 6-figure plus salaries. They're very young, very on it. And I just thought to myself, well, it says it all really, because, you're working internally, you're supporting the business, you're not getting new business. You don't get very much respect because obviously you're seen as an overhead and a necessary evil. And this was the type of company that you weren't allowed to work from home. You sort of had to clock in and clock out, and you sort of had to be back within the hour for your work. And it just said it all really. And the reason I left is solely because of that. It just wasn't for me. Whereas if I wanted to work on the front line, I would I'd be working 70, 80 hours a week. And I get that, it was the kind of firm that had, they had their own Marks and Spencers down in the basement. They had beds so you could stay overnight. And I didn't choose to do that, but there was that ethos in the company that, everyone has to work the same hours. Everyone has to do this. And once again, it came down to trust. There was very, very little trust. Whereas when I was consulting after that, I worked for an outsourcing company, and essentially, as long as I did my work, they were absolutely happy with where I was, what I was doing. The whole point about FaceTime, well, you can go into the office, you can have a stressful commute, you can be in the office, and you get the people that just walk around talking to people, or just hardly doing any other work. So I've never understood the whole value of somebody being in the office and actually being unproductive, whereas somebody's sitting at home, they wake up at 6 o'clock, they don't have to put their makeup on, or get ready for work. They get a couple of hours extra, and then they think, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I don't have to go home, I'll do a couple of extra hours work. And it's once again, as Scott said, it really is a trust thing. I work on an hourly rate at the moment, and I only charge for the hour. If I do a quarter of an hour over or a half an hour over, I won't charge that, because it's a trust thing. Whereas I know that if I had to do a ton of work, the company would pay me more than 8 hours a day. So I never understand it. It's, if I'm doing my job, nobody's complaining about me doing my job. People can get hold of me. I mean, I'm even one of those people that say, look, if it's an emergency, do give me a call on the weekend, or give me a call on my holiday. I don't mind that kind of thing, because at the end of the day, I don't charge for it. But if, for example, I need to do something during the day on a Monday or a Tuesday, I know the company won't moan or complain, because they can always get hold of me. So once again, it comes back to the whole trust piece. And if I'm not doing my job, you should know I'm not doing my job, and have me up about it. If not, don't employ me. And that's kind of where I come from. So pretty much same as Scott, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question comment from Chris in the audience, which is basically, on the Japanese model, they spend a lot of time at work, as do Americans. But is the productivity per day or per person day really what they're caring about there, or is it not the issue? I'd say actually adding an extra 10 hours to the workday is not increasing productivity. It's probably spreading it out a little more. But admittedly, I think all of us on this particular session are probably fairly flexible and quite trusted workers. So there's that issue of trusting employees, if you're an employer, has come up a few times now. So given we're all at least in some way related to security, and trust is vitally important to security as well, are we basically saying that trust is vital to the way that you work with people too? If you're an employer, if you're an employee, do you need to have that two-way trust? What happens if it's gone, and how can you build it? And let's kick off with Scott there, because we've done other people already.
Sure. I just kind of want to basically pick up on something that Rob literally just said about the I'll only bill for the hour even if it takes me an hour and 15 because it's a trust issue. I do the same under very certain circumstances. If the client I'm working for is pretty decent, they're cool, they're stressed about the project, yes, so I'm getting kind of, snippy emails because we're all in it together. If I feel part of that group and I feel as if we're all working towards the same goal, I will do the exact same thing. I will only bill for the time that I worked because do you know what? I actually enjoyed it and I feel as if I contributed. On the flip side to that, if I have a particularly difficult client that is not particularly nice, that they've been, it almost feels as if they've been forced to work with someone outside. Let's say they have incident and they're doing incident response as a reaction rather than proactive, and they have to do it because it's a checkbox exercise for, for whatever reason, and they're forced to do it and they're getting really narky and they're trying to tell me, you need to do this. This is how you need to do things. They're trying to tell me how to do my job. I'm billing you for that extra 15 minutes because you've just wasted my time. And then I don't feel as if there's trust there. I don't feel as if there's mutual respect. I don't feel as if, and those types of clients, as soon as that kind of thing starts kicking off, those type of clients are the ones that are not going to pay on time. I'm going to be chasing them for 6 months for the invoice. They're not going to pay the expenses. They're going to, when the initial contract has been approved, at the end of the contract, they'll bitch and moan about the price, they'll bitch and moan about the work or anything. It's like I don't know if any of you have seen that famous talk by a designer called F You Pay Me. It's a great talk about how he hired a lawyer to do all these accounts because so many clients would try and cherry pick their way out of a contract. I know that's kind of segueing away from the actual question you asked, but getting back to the question, I think we've all read or aware of the Mythical Man month. I think a lot more people need to read that, and not just software people. I think everyone needs to read that and go, so if I throw more people at this, more time at this, more money at this, I'm not going to get a better result. I'm just going to get a more expensive result and a lot more burnt out staff.
So I just want to check what you're saying is if I added another 20 people to this panel, we wouldn't get to a quicker, better answer.
Funnily enough, you might actually, depending how much we've all drunk. But
you're on the coffee.
I'm on the coffee, yeah, but that means I can talk quicker. So,
Rob.
Yeah, I mean,
there we go. You're not on mute anymore.
Yeah, no, sorry. I really don't have much more to add than what Scott did. Really, I mean, I 100% agree with what he said. I kind of sort of kind of covered it really. What I said. I suppose it is what you put into it. If you, it's kind of that I don't know if you've ever heard of that story about. There's a builder and he gets his mates there's a guy and he gets his mate who is a builder to build a house for him, and the builder does a really crap job. I mean, it's totally atrocious. The wiring's bad, the plumbing's atrocious, and then this chap turns around and goes, here's the keys to your house. This is your house, Mr. Builder. I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for me. And it kind of turns around to say, you get what you put into it. And it's the same with, treating your staff the same way, because I used to have somebody that used to work for me part-time. And I used to say to her, look, come in when you want, go when you want, just let me know what's going on. And it came to the point where she was doing an extra 2 days a week, absolutely free, because she loved the working environment, and she loved the way that she could come and go. And I knew that she would do her work and do it properly. And once again, it's that trust element, and it's just sort of doing what you're supposed to do, and not taking the mickey. And I think that's treating people like adults, isn't it? Really, it goes back to that point.
Pelham.
Okay, so I like it, and I like what you said, Scott, about trust and treating people like adults. And I like what you said, Rob, about the positive aspects of trust. And getting people to contribute more than they're asked. And I like Scott's story, not story, but account of giving that extra if it's a nicer client. But there is a downside, or there is a dark side to trust. Why does the trust exist? Good side, because everyone's nice, everything's friendly, everything's above board, we're treating people like adults, it's quite a flat structure. Dark side, because you've been indoctrinated. Okay, so you might think, oh no, that's quite an inflammatory statement. But if you think of a lot of company onboarding programs, it's designed to bring new recruits in line with a company's work ethos. And instead of the push factor, because you can actually push people out of an organization, who knew? They'll invent pull factors, and you can create a pull factor for any type of industry. If I was in the charity sector and I'm helping blind people, well, that's quite a good pull factor anyway. But if I am in a factory and we make boxes, well, it's very difficult to instill that pull factor unless I explain that we are either the pinnacle of box manufacturing, and therefore we need to keep that wonderful hard work ethos, or maybe I want to tell everybody that everybody relies on my boxes so much. They try and create a bit of a mirage. And so that sleight of hand is, give me free extra labor and extra input, and I'll give you an image of your work being more important than it is. So there's a dark side to the trust, because then you can trust your employees to give the extra because they're going to go forward. And you can take the darkness even further. You get your employees to promise customers things personally. And I think Scott mentioned individual relationships between people giving their word or something around that nature. Well, if you squeeze, especially young, impressionable people, to use all of their, mum and dad education about being a good, upstanding citizen, if you get them to give their word to people for unrealistic things, then you've outsourced not the output, but the outcome, because you can trust that they are going to go above and beyond to fulfill the promise, because they, as a human being, have not been corrupted so badly. I know this is specific to some industries, perhaps the law sector. I don't know what Robert thinks, but perhaps sales, perhaps other industries. And that's where we get Robert Kiyosaki's why A grade students work for C grade students and B grade students work in the public sector. So I know there's a few inflammatory comments in what I've said, okay? But I thought I'd throw out a negative side to trust as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to pick up on that. You've hit the nail on the head. I used to work for a huge recruitment company. It was global.
Oh no! Has the recruitment company come in and cut off your line?
They come after him.
I have something to pick up with you while we're waiting on Rob reconnecting.
Yeah.
Basically, in the darker side of trust, one of the favorite things for HR to do at my previous employment was to give all the new starts a laptop and a phone. And they thought this was wonderful. And yeah, you can use it for your own personal stuff. You can install whatever you want on there, as long as it's, Spotify or something kind of average and not like something that's going to kill your machine. You can do that. And these kids, I mean, they were literally kids, thought, oh, this is wonderful. I get a free laptop and a free phone. It's a dark pattern, because they know that you're probably, if you have a laptop at home, then great. If you don't, then this is a free laptop, quote unquote. But what are you going to be doing at 9 o'clock when you're on Facebook at the same time? You're going to be checking your work emails. You're going to be, because you got this free laptop, and it's so nice of that really nice company to, spend all this money on a £300 Dell machine, fine, but all this money on this brand new iPhone, this is great. I can play my games. Oh, there's a work email, or there's a text. I might as well just answer it, rather than that disconnect and throwing it in the drawer at the end of the day and going, nah, screw it, I'm done. So yeah, I totally get that.
And Scott, can I jump in on that? Because there is a more insidious side to that. If it would be believed, and of course it's just conjecture and no one has any real idea, those can be easily transformed into listening devices. And you might say, well, would there be an HR person sitting on the end of a line listening all this time? And the answer is no, because it converts everything into text and they literally search for interesting terms. Now, that of course is just conjecture and it's hearsay, but some people have posited that that's a possibility.
Forget about the positing. Look at the university stuff recently where literal students were doing exams at home and the software was monitoring if there was talking in the background, if there was anything. And a lot of students actually failed because they were rereading the questions. That's something I do to better understand it because I'm a bit of an idiot and I don't really understand text when I just read it. So I will talk out loud, I will sing, I will hum, and all of a sudden these students fail because they were clearly cheating. So it's not completely out with the realms of possibility. It is clearly an issue. I think we got Rob back.
We did. I think
sorry
he's
about
back.
that. Sorry.
Did they come after you? Have you been told not to talk about recruitment again?
Well, it's quite fun. I got a phone call and a knock at the door, and I had to I had to behave myself. But just really quickly, essentially, the recruitment company, it was basically paying 40% below market value, but the people I was working with were obsessed with it. And I thought to myself, all right, am I of higher intelligence than everybody else at this company because I know exactly what they're trying to do? But no, because some of the people that were working were, very senior people, very intelligent, very smart, but there was an obsession with doing the best for the company. And you probably can guess what I'm going to say is I left after a few months because I wasn't happy. But you're absolutely right. And it's just it was they were abusing, and I don't know what it was. It was it was recruiting people to do jobs.
I think you've pretty much hit on it with one word there. They were abusing. It was an abusive relationship.
But I don't understand how though, and why, because it was it wasn't a prestigious job. It wasn't particularly exciting. It was just I have no idea how they got away with it.
But Robert, I think we could do it in just a very quick scenario here. Let's imagine that, just for argument's sake, there was another panelist called James. So I'm looking at all of these nice Zoom panels, and we've got James, we've got Scott, we got another James, and we got Robert, and we got me. 5 people. What if I said, okay, I want us to all start a company, and there are 4 main roles. And James, you do 1, Scott, you do 2, James, you do 3, Rob, you do 4. And we're going to go with this mantra of saving the world by doing Zoom calls, and it's going to save the world. And I actually managed to convince you all, because maybe you're new people, that this is worthwhile. What is the one thing that none of you know? What am I doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. I'm collecting 1/5 of everything we make. I've given you the spectre of saving the world. I've given you all tasks, and I have neglected to actually tell you I'm not doing any of this. I've just let this trust that we're saving the world through Zoom calls. I've let it take on a life of its own. Anyway, sorry, that's a bit out there, but I thought I'd do it.
I will just point out to you, Pelham, I am taking on a job in the whole thing that we're doing. I have got a role there. I've got duties and everything. I did think about that approach, but I didn't go down it. We have had a couple of questions in, or a few questions in. So one of them is around in tech in particular, and ultimately we're all working in tech. I mean, Helen, you weren't working in tech, you were working in events, but now events are tech. Rob, you're a lawyer, but you're a proper lawyer working with privacy, so you're in tech. Scott, you're definitely tech, you don't get to argue with that. But in high tech, work tends to come in bursts, whether that's urgent or whether it's because something's just happened. Is work from home, or I'd say work remotely, better for handling very varying needs? And the bit I want to pick up on this question is that so that loyal employees will give their all when it's needed, and more willingly, if they don't face the requirement, to give their all when it's not needed. Let's go, Rob.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have had to fly out to Dubai due to an emergency situation with literally a few hours notice. It was business class, so I can't complain. But I have had to do that, and that was because there was a major breach and I needed to go over there and actually speak to the CEO and all the very important people that going to face flack if they didn't get to speak to me. But it's the whole principle, isn't it? So turning to not so much to high tech, but to my commercial work and my privacy work. So there could be a data breach any second of the day. And I've always said to companies where I've acted as a data protection officer or within privacy, you can access me any day, anytime. But I've also had to check an inbox, and this with Merlin, James, it is sort of, we did have the inbox, and we did monitor it all the time, because that's when we would probably find out when there was a breach. And going back to the short burst bit, so I used to do a lot of commercial contracts, and a lot of the commercial contracts were based on tender and business activity of the company. So sometimes, we'd have, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 tenders a week. And that would mean me working over the weekend, working late evenings, because there was a burst of activity. Whereas some weeks I could get away with going to the cinema, mowing my lawn, because the activity wasn't there. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if your lifestyle can accommodate the kind of burst of activity lifestyle, then why not? Whereas if you do need a 9 to 5, I've got an uncle that he's an absolute genius, but he's never wanted more than a 9 to 5, and he has a job where he can literally do 9 to 5, and he loves that. Whereas me, I love to work when I need to work, but I'm always there, and that's kind of part of the sell or the south of me that I sell, So yeah, it really depends on the individual, because some individual can't do bursts. Some people might have young children, other commitments. But for me, it's always worked out perfectly, because I do love having those sneaky days where it's a Friday, it's perhaps 12 or 1 o'clock, and you can go down the pub and not worry about going back to work. But that's just me, and I think it's very individualistic. But it does work for some people. For other people, it doesn't.
Yeah, I am just going to feed in. We were meant to have another panelist who unfortunately couldn't make it due to flexible working reasons, but I think she'd have a really good feed in on that, where you mentioned children, that she works very flexibly and for herself because she has children. And children, apparently, I'm told this, I don't have any, I plan to keep it that way, but apparently children don't keep schedules particularly well. So just to comment on that one, and we'll come back to it. But Scott, on the question we just had.
Yeah, I personally, it really depends on the employee, but I personally really like bursts of work, because it means that I can, yeah, okay, fine. It does nothing to alleviate the guilty feeling that I'm getting paid here and I'm kind of in the pub. It does nothing to alleviate that, but that's a good thing, because it means I care about the job. It means I care about the role. It means I care about the contract or whatever, or the client I'm working on. It also means, and the client is always fully aware of this, they can, as long as they're not taking the mickey, they can absolutely call me anytime, and I will more or less drop everything and go. Similar to Rob, I had a situation a few years ago. A client of mine was exhibiting at a trade show in Germany. And they asked me to build all their tech for their setups. They had big screens, and you could go up with a tablet and play around and like build your own furniture effectively. It was a really cool system. They didn't test it before they went out, despite my prior warnings, and they flew out there. And of course, what happens when you don't test these things? The tech completely died. I think even at one point the customs officials opened the box and half the tech got really wet. So I had to buy new tech. We had backups in the office, so we're all good. I flew out there. Stayed in the worst hotel in my life. It was horrible because all the nice hotels had been booked out. All the average hotels had been booked out because of this trade show. So I dropped everything and went, and didn't think twice about it. Spent 2 days in Germany in an area that I had no idea, don't speak German, did not like it at all, but I did it for the client without thinking about it. So yeah, I like these bursts of work, because for the next 4 days, I could just chill out, do nothing.
Was that C-bit?
Sorry?
Was that the C-bit?
Orgatech?
Oh, okay. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just a massive. It was huge, and it was in the big
Nuremberg?
exhibition. Yeah, I believe so. I can't. Honestly, I just flew. I didn't even know where it was going. I just gave paper to the taxi driver and said, "Take me there," because my one thing was fly out, work a couple of days non-stop, get this tech working because it was meant to be their focal point of their stand. Didn't think about it, just did it. Loved it because I knew I could come back home, spend 4 days. Didn't really matter whether it was a weekend or a long weekend. I didn't need to ask anyone. I just took 4 days off. Like that was a benefit. So bursts worked for me, but I can see how that wouldn't work for others.
Pelham, and then we've got a couple of ideological questions, and we're coming to the end of our time then, so we'll relax after that.
I kind of think it's the people at the top ends of the corporate ladder and the people at the bottom of the corporate ladder may have, in effect, better work-life balances because the people at the top, I don't know, they either absolutely love being in a corporation and or they're getting golden handcuffs and so they can't really leave anyway, or the people at the very bottom are doing something very different to the people in the middle. And by that, I mean, we're talking about the difference between output-based tasks and outcome-based tasks. And if you hire a waiter to serve your meal, it's pretty much an output-based task, which is why the whole tip system is so silly because, I mean, it was the chef that made the outcome. Anyway, that's not the point. So if you've got the people at the bottom who are literally, you need to sit on the help desk and answer anybody's query from 9 till 5, then you can go home. That's really output based. And then if I said, James, can you get me some dancing monkeys right now? Well, that's a big task. And what are dancing monkeys? How much do they dance? When do they dance? That's kind of outcome. Or if I said, James, I want you to sell Oracle on the idea of sponsoring dancing monkeys. It's an outcome based task. And so those people with outcome-based jobs are, in effect, less fortunate unless they remove themselves from the corporate structure, and so I think that's very important. I've been a civil servant, and of course, everything is very bureaucratic, and we can go down the whole laugh of what's all bureaucratic and that. But working as a private secretary to cabinet minister was very much 9 to 5, because literally I sat there and I batted low. To be fair, I got calls in the middle of the night. That's not really that accurate, but you bat back all sorts of tasks. It's a lot like sitting on an IT help desk. Minister needs the brief. Ministers in Parliament. Ministers at the dispatch box. Boom, 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 and then come 6 o'clock, you're free to go to the pub or whatever. But I've also been in a policy job where they're like, right, I want you to do a policy document on something, and that's an outcome-based task. So that's a garbled way of saying I think we should distinguish between the two.
Okay, I'm going to jump on that one, having recently moved from an output-based model to an outcome-based model of being paid. And yeah, I think I'd largely agree with it. I just think that the working environment as we have had it up until possibly quite recently, and probably still have it to a degree, has been very skewed towards output-based rewards, and that's often been for outcome-based roles. So people are told, you will be here 8 hours a day, and we will measure you and reward you based on the fact that you are here, and that is your output. But actually, what you're adding to the company is, well, we want to report once a month with recommendations, and these recommendations will make a difference.
Which is really mean, isn't it? Because then HR, who's nobody's friend, be careful. They're little spies, and they're nothing else. So they are there to try and enforce the law of the land on you. That's why in Dubai there's not so much HR, because it's Dubai. But if the law of the land says the working time directive X, Y, and Z, blah blah blah, then the company will use this as again a bit of a mirage. They'll say, so James, we've employed you 9 to 5. We expect you to be efficient with your time, and because you need to be efficient, you need to get all your work done in that time frame. But I want you to buy Buckingham Palace. something random, stupid, and they'll forget that they asked you to buy Buckingham Palace tomorrow, because that's what happens. And that is really bad and oppressive, because on the one hand they're going, but James, you're not managing your time very well. How many palaces have you bought? Do you see what I mean? It's very underhand.
Yeah, so they're measuring you based on outcome, rewarding you based on output, and only actually giving you time or tasks or anything else based on that output as well. So your performance is based on, well, did you attend the daily meeting? Not on, did you actually, developers are a perfect example of this. Did you get that function working is actually far more important to a development project than were you here 8 hours yesterday banging your head against a brick wall because that function still doesn't work. Or did you go home for 10 minutes, have a coffee, and figure it out?
Sorry, Robin, you go.
Yeah, no, just really quickly. I can always remember when I was in one building, and we had a coffee machine in a different building that was about 5 minutes away, and my boss's PA absolutely hated me. I can always remember my boss was away on business, and he came back and he went, "Oh, I heard you went over to the other building." So, yeah, we went to get a coffee there. So you spent 5 minutes getting a coffee at the other building. Well, yeah, because I needed to stretch my legs, get over there, and it goes back to the point of the whole spying thing, and just that complete lack of any sort of trust. It was absolutely mad. I couldn't believe that she was spying on me to the degree that my boss had to question me about going over to a different building and getting the coffee. It was ridiculous.
I have a similar situation. Previous company I used to work for, we had a lady in charge of HR that hated smoking, despised it. Was anti-smoking, anti-smoker. She heard that you smoked, and she would by default not like you, and make it abundantly clear. And then one day, a fire register got presented at the front desk, and it was, you have to sign in and out. That's okay, I don't have a problem with that. And then all of a sudden, it was you can't leave the building. There's not enough boxes to. So it was kind of a, there was kind of a like there was a proxy war going on. It was trying to cut down my smoke breaks, which I didn't really have that many. I think I went outside maybe 5 times a day, excluding lunchtime. So I wasn't really outside for that long. I was outside for 5 minutes. This is the same company, by the way, that released a document saying, please take 10-minute screen breaks. I was actually outside for less time as well. But there was just this idea of this proxy battle, and I was never really told it was about the smoking until I actually sat them down. Now, this comes back to something Rob said way earlier about agendas, and people, I think we all said about agendas, kind of dark patterns and stuff. I don't care if someone has an agenda, and I don't care if that agenda is, I want to do one, I want you guys to do the work, and I'm going to take 1/5 of the cut. That's fine. Don't have an issue with that as long as it's above board and I can see it. I've always said I have no issue with people with agendas, even if that agenda is, well, if it's morally questionable, I probably wouldn't be working with them. But even if that agenda is something not normal, that is absolutely fine as long as I know what that agenda is. It's people or companies I don't know what your agenda is that I'm incredibly skeptical of, i.e., a la the fire register. Just tell me if you have an issue with me going outside for smoke breaks. I can either justify that, change my behavior, or tell you you're wrong and do it anyway, because that's silly. Because that 5 minutes outside did help me solve the problem, it did help me solve the function. I don't need to be spied on. But the flip side of that is, if I'm going to have to sign in and out and give my dates and times over for I'm in the building, I'm not in the building, under the guise of a fire register, do you know what I'm doing outside? I'm taking longer having a smoke break. I'm going to have 2. I'm going to sit on my phone. I'm going to play around. I'm going to go in and then go and make a coffee, which is another 5 minutes. And then I'll sit at my desk and go, I'm raging. I'm genuinely, and I'm not thinking about the problem that I went outside to solve. So it's half an hour loss. In fact, it's an hour loss because it will take me half an hour to get back into the program. So yeah.
Right. I'm going to do a quick summary and then take us off live so everyone can talk freely, because cool. I know you've been very controlled and very professional in what you've been saying so far. But I think really what we've heard is 2 things. It's been about trust, and it's been about treating people like adults, which are almost but not quite the same thing. You can not trust someone and treat them like an adult. So you can put guide rails in place to say, no, don't jump off the cliff. I respect you're an adult. You can make your own decisions, but don't do that. And there is the trust side, which is both, this is what I expect from you, and also this is what I'm trying to do. You can disagree with it. You can do whatever you want with it, but I'll be honest, this is what we as an organization are doing. This is what we as an organization are looking for. This is what I as an employer want from my employees. If you can't do that, then I respect you enough as a person that you can turn around and say, yeah, I can't do that. And you can tell me, as Scott just said, I can change my behavior. I can do it differently. Would it be acceptable if I did it this way? You can change what your expectation. Would it be acceptable if I did it this way? Or we can just go, that's not going to work out. But it sounds like a lot of work-life balance. And I know we're a very skewed panel because all of us are fairly flexible, let's say, very outcome-based. But it sounds like a lot of it is where people are either expecting output-based measurements on outcome-based roles, or possibly also outcome-based measurements on output-based roles. Does anyone have some final comments for the last few minutes before I take us off air and we just have a general chat if people want to, or wander off to have a cocktail on the beach if you happen to be enjoying your time in Belgium?
On a positive note, even if you don't have a passion, you can get passionate about pretty much anything. You just have to see the beauty in it, and that'll help with the work-life balance, in that you'll enjoy it more. You just have to open up to enjoying the box making, or I don't know. You can find the passion.
Yeah, it's perfectly possible. Even if I don't necessarily understand or care about the perfect box making, I might still get invested in the craftsmanship of my colleagues and the making of the box. So there are things that can be done there. No, I'd agree with that. Anyone else?
Sorry,
no. You know what, Scott? You go, because you let me go the last.
No. You go first. I like the last kind of words. I'm that kind of guy.
No worries. All I was going to say, and you know what, a lot of this is around motivation, to be perfectly honest, because when I was younger, I was all about the money. Chasing the money, chasing the buck, chasing the dream. So you know what, I'd pretty much do anything to make sure that I was getting that money, and then I would job hop, every year or so. So there is that element to it as well, and there is definitely a work-life balance. But then if somebody wants to work extremely hard to be able to, or feels the need to work extremely hard, I should say, to be able to get to where they want to when they're 30, 35, 40, then it comes down to, sacrificing maybe your younger years for those years when you're older. And once again, it depends on the individual. I'm not saying that you have to work like a dog to be able to get to that point and to achieve it. But it's all about that sort of mental philosophy as well, in terms of, where do you want to be in 10, 20 years? And, there are some businesses that you work for that you will have to work extremely hard to be able to get there. There's others that there aren't. So I think that's worth throwing into the mix as well, really.
Scott, we do actually have one question that I want to ask after you've had your say, and just to get a very quick answer on. But if you shoot off with opinion first, and
Sure.
Then we'll go for the question.
Sure, I'll go for my mini rant and I'll try and tie up both your points. You said about motivation, absolutely spot on. One of the big problems I see from a lot of students or kids that are asking me, questions about, hey, you've worked from home for the last 10 plus years. I'm loving this. I love this idea. I just get to roll out my bed. I always try and tell them, look, you really need to make it very clear where the balance, the depth. You need to make a room or an area of your house that is for work and for play. Like, even if that's just a kitchen table that you put your laptop on and you put your laptop away and you use the laptop on the sofa to Twitter and Facebook and play games and stuff. That's a difference. But what I find with a lot of those kids is they're actually doing this like the nudge factor. Coming back to basically the passion comment, they are working 9 to 5, and then the next week they'll be working 9 to 5:30, and then the next week 9 to 6, because they want to get ahead and they want to make it look good, and that causes a problem, as we all know, where they're not telling their managers that they're working that extra amount of time. They're not getting paid for it, even though they love their job, which is fine because they're really passionate about it. And I'm one of those people, any industry I go into, any subdivision of an industry, I want to know everything about it. Film and TV, I'm going up to the lighting guys and going, how does that work? What was that thing? What's that clip? How does that plug in there? I love that because I want to learn so much. The problem with that is a lot of these students I'm speaking to is they end up working 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Their manager doesn't know that they're doing that, and their output is different. So if they actually work 9 to 5, their output would be lower, and therefore that causes an issue, because when burnout happens, which always bloody does, they suddenly, their output goes down, and everyone's like, well, wait a minute, you're clearly slacking. And I think you need to kind of, be passionate, go into it, work extra hours. That's great, but let people know you're doing it so that they don't think that suddenly you went from Superman to me, basically.
Thank you. Right. So there is a comment on LinkedIn from Victoria saying, firstly, as a single parent, you learn work-life balance quickly, very quickly. Kids learn that mum has to work and they have to work around it. So that's good to know that kids will work to a schedule with enough training. But the question is, and I think this is an interesting one, which we can do a quick yes/no on to get a consensus. What drives people to produce? Is it project and challenge-based outcome to the employer, or is it the revenue outcome? I know that for me personally, I have turned down greater revenue because I've been more interested in a different challenge. But equally, I'm in an extremely privileged position in being able to do that, where the challenge and the interesting work is more important to me. So for this panel here, what's the overall consensus on that one?
I'll go first.
Yep.
Depends if you're in a sales-based role or a creative production operations-based role, because the way they recruit salespeople, and in particular, Robert mentioned recruiters, is to find incredibly money-motivated people. And those people are money-motivated not because they just love the Scrooge McDuck diving through gold coins. They don't. That's not it. It's because they have some specific thing wrong, like they have some gangsters coming after them. That would be the ideal executive search person. And for that, they ask a specific question. I give you £1 million, but you got to spend it right now. What are you going to spend it on? And believe it or not, for the lady, the ideal response is not a house, is not stocks and shares. They want a lady to say shoes, because it's so frivolous that even if I gave you £1 million today, you'd flitter it away, or I'd give it to my gangster friends that I owe loads of money to. They love that. So that's a very expletive and colorful way of saying it depends if you're in sales or other roles.
Okay. Rob, to save you and Scott arguing over who goes first again, if you go first.
Thank you. Yeah, no, just really quickly. Yeah, I turned down a very lucrative role to work at Merlin, James. So actually, I was super excited to work for theme parks and Legoland. So yeah, it's don't get me wrong, money is a big motivator, but in that position, I thought, you know what, I'm going to love this job, and especially after meeting the hiring manager and stuff, I thought, yeah, this is it for me. So yeah, I mean, but turning that on its head, I have taken jobs because I wanted a big increase in salary. I managed to get a 20 grand increase in salary once, which is huge. Left the job after a year, which is obviously my kind of thing. So that was when I was younger, but now definitely it's all about sort of the job experience and being able to work with the people and actually enjoying it rather than chasing the green.
And Scott?
I can summarize this really quickly. When I was younger, it was always wealth before health, and now for me, it's health before wealth. I absolutely will not bill if I get an investigation in and it's fraud investigation, for example, and the person's lost a crap ton of money. I will spend inordinate amounts of time trying to help them and guide them to either get that money back, file police reports, do the right thing, and actually find out a little bit more about how it happened and trying to train them that it's okay. I'm probably not going to bill them for it because I really enjoy that investigative side. I really enjoy helping the victims. I really enjoy the entire process. But the flip side to that is, 10, 15 odd years ago, I'd been very much more like, no, where's my check? I'm going to work corporate. That's why I went into corporate for 2 years. I lasted all of 2 years because, yeah, I don't suit that life. I think Victoria's moment of change was obviously having kids. So that, shift for me, it was just, I had depression and I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this field. I'm done with working myself to the bone. It's not worth it. Family's been impacted. My health has been impacted. I'm going to go and do something I really enjoy and I don't care about the money. Obviously, money's important. As long as I have enough money to pay the rent, pay the car, do some nice things and buy some nice stuff occasionally. For the most part, everything else is cream on top, and I'm quite happy just enjoying myself. That's where I come from.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to take us off the live stream now. So good night to everyone watching on LinkedIn in a second.